Dawn Lee Swan Magar was born January 27, 1973. She was found murdered in March 1973 in a wooded area in Chapin, Michigan. She had been reported missing since January 27th of that year. She was believed to have been abducted from her home in Chesaning, Michigan. But there's also reports that she could have been abducted from a shopping center in nearby Owasso. When her body was found, they said that she had been raped and shot 3 times. As the investigation started going, new technology and DNA analysis enabled Shiawassee County, Michigan police to charge Gerald Leroy Winger in 2001, who was identified by DNA collected at the murder scene. He was sentenced to life in prison in November 2001. The case was closed for more than 28 years after Dawn's body was found. She was married to Dawn Magyar. At the time of her murder, she was only 20 years old. And to make matters worse, they had just celebrated the first birthday of their son. Dawn was believed to have gone shopping on the day of January 27th. A friend had come forward and said that they had briefly talked with her in the supermarket checkout line, and then they saw her leave with her purchases. After Dawn failed to return home that day, her husband then reported her missing. Police ended up finding a truck that Dawn had borrowed that was abandoned. Her purchases were still inside, and her keys were scattered at the truck, suggesting a very forceful or violent abduction. Despite a massive search of the area involving 4,000 local volunteers, Dawn was not found. On March 4th, her body was discovered by 2 young brothers, Wayne and Bill Summers, who were tapping maple trees on their family farm in Saginaw County, Michigan. The medical examiner found that she had been raped and shot 3 times in the head and the back with a .22 caliber gun. An autopsy indicated that she had likely been killed within 90 minutes of being abducted. The bullets came from a Remington and 1 Winchester brand ammo. In 1974, in the month of June, a .22 caliber revolver believed to be the murder weapon was recovered from the Shiawassee River in Owasso. The revolver was rusted and unable to fire, but it was still loaded. It contained 3 spent rounds that matched the brand of bullets that had killed Dawn. The police were able to trace the gun to a pawn shop in Yuma, Arizona, where a man by the name of Robert Shaw had purchased it in 1965. Investigators had learned that he was Dawn's previous husband, but they were unable to locate him. In 1976, Dawn's wallet and identification were found on the bank of the river in the same area where the .22 gun had been found. The state police in 1995 decided to reactivate the case. Detective Sergeant reviewing old cold cases realized that advances in DNA analysis, which had not been available as a forensic tool when the earlier investigation was conducted, might yield evidence to identify Dawn's killer. As the county police had collected sperm specimens from Dawn's body at the time of the crime, the Michigan State Police DNA Laboratory in East Lansing arranged for forensic DNA testing on this material to develop profiles of Dawn and her potential rapist and killer. They also arranged for testing by an independent laboratory and they then renewed their search for the known men in Don's life. Finally, in 1998, police located the gun's owner, Robert Shaw. He told authorities that he had owned the gun which they found, but that it had been lost many years before. And thankfully, he was cleared of any wrongdoing due to DNA testing, as his fingerprints were not found. Years later, Shaw told police that he remembered that soon after they divorced, his ex-wife had dated a man named Gerald Leroy Wingart. And as far as he believes, he said that Wingart may have taken his gun at the time. Police learned that Wingart, at age 20, then a married University of Michigan engineering student with a scholarship, had been convicted in 1961 for the rape of a blind woman who was also a student at UM. And he was also charged with armed robbery of her escort in Ann Arbor Township, Michigan. He ended up being sentenced to 8 years in prison and was released in 1967. And before I go on, I just want to say, how could they just give him 8 years for something so dangerous, so sad, so heartbreaking? I mean, that's pretty pathetic on the police's end. Because of that, a young woman who was remarried, who had her very first child, was murdered because they decided to give a killer 8 years in prison. That never would have happened if they had given him maybe life in prison. Anyways, back to the story. Wingart worked as a long-haul trucker and lived in more than one state. When police learned about his relation in the Magyar case, Wingart was then 60 years old, living quietly in Center Lane, Michigan with his fourth wife. He had a grown daughter from a previous marriage. He had worked accounting, at Chrysler Sterling Heights stamping plant. He was known for his computer skills, and he was also a respected member of his community. As to how they got Wingart's DNA, it's because they were able to stake out and get a cigarette butt that they saw him smoking. After he had smoked the cigarette, he hit the edge of the trash can with the burning end of the cigarette and threw it in. So they waited until he went inside to grab the cigarette from the trash and take it into testing. That's when they found out that his DNA had matched the samples taken from Don's crime scene. They also determined that Wingart had been in the Owasso area visiting a friend around the time of Don's murder. Unable to establish any link between Magyar and Wingart, investigators believe that Wingart had seen the young woman in the store or shopping center parking lot and randomly chose her as his victim. On March 7, 2001, Wingart, age 60, was arrested and charged with Magyar's murder. He could not be charged for the kidnapping or rape because the statute of limitations, which were 10 and 6 years, had been expired. He was tried in November of that year at the Livingston County Courthouse. He claimed in his defense that he had consensual sex with Don, but experts were able to put a cross on that by saying that Wingart's DNA was left on Don's body during the brief time frame that she went missing and was killed. On November 27th, Wingart was found guilty of first-degree felony and premeditated murder. He was later sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dawn's mother, Eleanor, and her brother, Larry Swan, and his wife were alive to see the justice that they needed. Sadly, Dawn's father, Ralph Swan, had died in 1988, never knowing that his daughter would finally get justice. Wingart's appeal of his conviction was rejected in 2003 by the Michigan Appeals Court, which affirmed the verdict. In May of 2004, the Michigan Supreme Court denied his appeal of that ruling. At the time of his conviction, Wingart was under investigation for the death of young women and other crimes committed in Washtenaw and Ionia counties in the previous 10 years. The Argus Press reported in May 2004 that the Michigan Attorney General's office announced that it was reviewing the cold case of the April 7, 1979 rape and murder of 16-year-old Laura Mae McVeigh near Haberton, Michigan, with the potential for bringing charges against Wingart. Because he had never reached trial in the middle of McVeigh, double jeopardy prohibitions would not apply. The prosecutors were working with Michigan State Police and investigators. Wingart had been arrested on charges related to McVeigh's death, and he was arrested in 1981 for that. He was living in Niles, Michigan, where he grew up and had moved at least twice in the 2 previous years. That case ended up being dismissed before the trial by the Wexford County, Michigan judge, who ruled that the police had violated Wingart's rights in the course of a search for evidence. At the time of McVeigh's murder, Wingart was 38 and living in Eaton Rapids. He worked for the state government. He was known to have left the area after McVeigh disappeared and before her body was found a month after her death. He had moved to New York. Within 2 years, he had returned to Michigan. In 2004, police said that they expected to make use of advances in DNA analysis and other forensic technology in their investigation. Dawn's case was detailed in True TV's crime documentary, The Investigators. It was titled The Disappearance of Dawn. Then the station A&E also ran her case in the cold case files. A friend of Dawn by the name of Anthony Tony Hornis was a high school classmate of Dawn. He later became a reporter and covered the case for years for the Argus Press. Based on his work, he wrote and co-directed the film An Ordinary Killer in 2003, which was based on Dawn's murder. Jeff Kennedy also directed. This film starred Terrence Knox, Dennis Heskin, and Dan Haggerty. It was filmed at many other locations related to the crime and investigation. Harness also self-published a related book in the case, also entitled An Ordinary Killer 2008, developed from his screenplay and reporting. And since then, he's been an activist for unsolved murders of missing women and children. That's all, and before I go, I want to let you guys know I'm sorry for how I, spoke throughout the story. And I hope you guys enjoy this, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as hit that bell icon for notifications. Have a good day.